Hello, my name's Ewan Jones and I'm joined today by Rod, who is a regular here at Speaker's Corner. And he comes here to speak about anti-feminism and men's rights to general members of the public here in London in the UK. And so we're doing this video for the International Conference on Men's Issues 2020. So Rod, how are you doing? And also, what is it about Speaker's Corner as well that keeps you coming back? Why is it a good place to discuss issues to do with anti-feminism, to do with men's rights?
The Speaker's Corner is a really important historic place, and taking people off the internet and putting them into a real place, especially in a capital city like London, a major city, and challenging feminism has really been important. The feminists know we're here. They don't come and debate us. Things have changed slightly recently, but it's a really important thing to have a living presence offline. And we've been doing this probably about 6 years now, I think.
I'd say it's longer than that, isn't it?
I don't know.
We're 2020 now, and from what you said, it was not too long after 2010 when you started coming here.
Yeah, but we had groups back then. Groups started about 2011, 2012.
Right.
And it was a couple of years later when Richard brought us here, and we started coming. Yeah. We did come here at 2010, but I was too chicken to get up on the ladder.
Okay, sure. And so it was a few years later when you started doing your speeches here.
We came back, and it's been brilliant, and we've seen the landscape's changed around us incredibly, the political landscape, especially since 2016.
Mm-hmm. So some event happened back then that changed the political landscape, was it?
Yeah, well, Brexit, Trump, all sorts of things. And of course, 2019 and 20, what with Black Lives Matter, Antifa.
Yeah.
And in this country, Tommy Robinson and all sorts of things, completely.
So when you first started talking about issues to do with anti-feminism and men's rights here, how was it received? We received a hell of a lot of abuse. We were screamed at. We were called misogynists, often by men. Richard was pushed off a ladder at one point. I had one guy who used to really try and intimidate me by screaming in my ear at the side. We had quite a few things happen that were rather unpleasant, but it's actually it's a training. We were trained up basically to be able to cope with the abuse, and as your speaking gets better and you get more confident, those people, you know how to deal with them. Just the other week, some Muslims were actually standing up for some feminists, radical feminists, which is ridiculous because they're all abortionists, and the Muslims didn't know that. And one of the Muslims told me, he says, "You were born out of your mother's asshole." Which was rather rude. And that sounds pretty rude, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So it still goes on now, the abuse.
It does, but and I had the Red Pill movie poster behind me, and he says, "There's your mother in that," and I says, "Well, it's not that kind of movie." Right, and the feminist actually tried not to smile. So you learn to deal with the abuse. And often people who behave like that aren't that bright anyway, but you've got to be careful because they can be quite quick to violence.
And so initially there was just a lot of people screaming at you and abuse and so on. So I'm guessing a bit of a tough crowd back in 2013, 2014, but then things slowly started to change after that?
It did change, but when we immediately started, first of all, we couldn't get anyone to stop.
Yeah.
Because you've got to look like you can entertain people as well.
Right.
Because people come here to be entertained as well. And so, at first we just were standing there like plums. Mm-hmm. And then we started getting better. And we all of us guys, we have very, very different ways of speaking and interacting with the crowd. And it works brilliantly.
Yeah.
One of the hardest things to do is that when one of my fellows is speaking, I've got to keep my mouth shut because I so much want to answer the question, especially if I'm standing below him. And then you find he actually answers the question sometimes better than you would. Yeah. It's really interesting.
Nice, yeah. And so I remember coming towards the end of 2015, and at that point in time, I think that there was, the movement was certainly growing. There was a lot of, Milo Yiannopoulos was making a lot of appearances on the mainstream media where he was destroying the feminist narrative.
Yep.
And Yeah, there was a few other, instances and, events that were happening then. I think it was changing around that time. Did you sense that as well?
Oh, yeah. 2016 was the big one. I mean, you filmed us interviewing that radical Trotskyite feminist.
Yeah, that was pretty hilarious.
Yeah, that was hilarious. And that was just holding a little a GoPro, which unfortunately died on me. And it was just interacting, and we were all there. And it was before Trump came into power. So that was really funny.
That was an interesting event, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, from there, what's it been like the last few years then, since since Trump got in, and since we've had this populist movement that has grown, what's it been like the last few years here?
Well, we had a problem here because there was radical Muslims trying to take over, and they were praying here, which is illegal. You can't have a religious service in a royal park without permission. And they were slowly turning it into an outdoor mosque, and they were beating up some of the moderate Muslims as well. We'd seen quite a bit of violence at times, not too much, obviously, but it's got better. It's become more political now. We get more people here. There was a huge surge of people when Tommy Robinson was talking about the massive English girls being raped by Muslim gangs, and that was a huge surge. And it's slowly got more, less religious, more political, and we have a lot of foreigners who come here. We don't get that as many English people as we should at all. It's really annoying, who want to speak about things, but it's more interesting now than it's ever been. And at the moment, this is not going to be a mosque, so that's good, an outdoor mosque.
Right.
It's always been, I mean, going back in history, it's always been religious, it's always been political. And it's often been quite volatile at times.
Yeah.
And now we have red femmes coming here with a lady who calls herself Posy Parker. And we've never had so many radical feminists come here, which is really good. And of course, they've been deplatformed by other feminists because of their anti-trans stand, which is really interesting. So now they're fragmenting the feminist movement.
Yes, yeah, I've seen this as well with the old style Germaine Greer style feminists and the new Laura Bates style feminists who were high on the intersectionality radar and so on.
Her real name is Kelly J. Keane.
Who's that?
Posy Parker.
Oh, right.
And what's really interesting, this is the first time we've actually been able to interact with radical feminists. And, the gynocentrism is unbelievable.
Yeah.
You've got abortionists saying, think of the children. I call them wailing women and witches, because all of these well-off women, they're like babies. And it's really quite brutal with their complete disregard for anyone else apart from their own fat butts, basically, constantly wanting more. I mean, I call them, I've thought of the term as militant dependence.
Yes.
Because they, even though they have so much influence over society, they're still dependents, and they still want more stuff. They're not actually going to take the role where they're going to start actually looking after other people as well. And it's really interesting. Black Lives Matter came along and they started having a bash at them, having a go at them because of their stance on trans. And we can sit back and be amused by this. Because we're not really part of this. I tell them that this is what really annoys me about them.
I mean, that's just Black Lives Matter standing up for the woke agenda, isn't it? Generally, it's like got nothing to do with the black community at that point. It's the woke agenda entirely.
Well, attacking anything intelligent or uplifting.
I
mean, I watched some stuff on Malcolm X, and some of the things he said was actually quite challenging. That a lot of the Black Lives Matter people wouldn't agree with that at all. I don't know anything about Malcolm X, but that was interesting. So, I mean, that is now the new flavour of what we're dealing with, what's happening now. And, of course, we're now dealing with the lockdown crowds. But, of course, I keep bashing on with my thing is about feminism and talking about the dictionary definition is nothing on what, it says what feminism is, but it's not what it does. And to have radical feminists here, and we often find when we're speaking to a feminist woman or an outraged woman, you're not actually speaking to the person.
Yeah,
You're using them as an example to the crowd. And the foul language, the unpleasantness, often the storming off with giving you the finger, all this sort of thing. And I've also had the chance to meet academics, and I'm absolutely shocked. I mean, when you get older, your doctor looks young to you, and some of these academics look like kids to me, but there's no standard of academia in any of their conduct. And you actually get a full-on tantrum from somebody who's very well paid and who's teaching young people. It's horrible.
And so we see a little bit of that here then.
I have
the
seen it in the
academics
past.
coming along and you reduce them to going for a full-blown adult tantrum.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
I've witnessed it as well, yeah.
Well, one of our colleagues went and spoke to the guy and got through a bit better. I was actually probably a bit more confrontational with the guy. But and there were three of them: a woman who had social skills, a big bloke who looked like he'd just rolled out of a dustbin, and a little Asian guy who was having a massive tantrum. Okay. And you were just thinking, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
An academic is meant to be someone like, Janice Fiamingo. That's somebody who is inspiring.
Yeah. Interesting to listen to, making good points.
And you're learning all the time.
Exactly, yeah. You don't really find this from these woke academics. No. It's more the opposite. They sort of seem to attack your intelligence and promote ideas that you were discounted a long time ago as being imbecilic. But,
and then say that you're everything from a Nazi to whatever. I mean, you spend more time looking for where their nanny is. You think she's wandered off and she needs to come back and maybe sort them out, but it's pathetic.
I remember you did the interview with Laurie Penny here as well.
Yeah.
That was an interesting conversation.
Well, I saw her and I recognised her.
Yeah.
And I said, I know who you are, and she looked all happy, and I said, well, I don't think much of you. And that's when she didn't look very happy. It was David Starkey gave her a good telling off on stage.
Yes,
he's been deplatformed. One of our most amazing speakers and academics in the country. And he was just next to the spoilt little girl, and I think he'd had a glass of wine, and he was going to do some other charity thing in the past where she was.
He very much did the teacher pointing at her, wagging his finger thing. Yes,
And she's just sitting there, and she looks like she's wearing a 1970s science fiction bangle around her neck, I think. Something that looked a bit silly if I've got the right video in mind. And the unbelievable contrast of his intellectual status and also his kindness and his charitability compared to her arrogance. And I mean, often we got feminists who aren't women, the girls, and they're actually pointing their finger at us.
Yeah.
While they're talking to us. And you got this. And it's not a woman, it's a girl who's come from a wealthy family. One of the funniest things we saw a couple of weeks ago was Black Lives Matter. And they had the poshest voice of a young black woman I've ever heard.
Right, yeah.
On a loudspeaker. And she's obviously been educated at some of the best schools in this country. And all around her, the mob, and it was absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
She's got more privilege by the way she spoke, and she had to have been. No one would go around talking like that unless you've had an amazing upbringing in this country, because most girls who speak like that are white posh girls.
No, that's all good. So, I mean, we've looked at, the general experience of being at Speaker's Corner and doing the talks here. And so you think overall there's been a positive change in the last 6 or so years that you've been coming here?
There's been a positive change in politics. In the men's rights movement, there's been a huge change. The first thing is that women have stepped up, and some of our best speakers now who represent us are women. They seem to have the social power men don't, and people ignore men.
Yeah.
And the fact that Elizabeth Hobson's now the leader of Justice for Men and Boys is brilliant. Oh, and the other thing is we've always been very lucky to have Mike Buchanan join us.
Yes, he comes along quite a bit, isn't he? Yeah.
And we've had a lot of fun with him down here, and he enjoys it. And Elizabeth's come a couple of times. We've had Natty here, and we've had a lot of our other guys who come down here, because we're also joined by people who don't get on the ladder, but they stand among the crowd and they discuss things with the crowd.
Right.
Which is really good. And of course we've had times when people have turned nasty, and it's good to have a few people round. One of our friends, Linton, a guy got up on his step ladder Right, and he was.
I remember I was involved in trying to bring the other guy down from the step ladder in that incident. Yeah.
Well, Linton's in his mid-60s, and he's eye level with the guy when he's on the ladder. The guy got on his ladder and was towering over him, and then you got the police in. We all came over, and then the guy lifted his fist when he got off the ladder to punch Richard, and you brought the police in time. And of course, the guy was defending his wife's honour. For sure.
I'm not sure what he was doing. I mean, it was fairly idiotic. I was trying to remind him that it was Speaker's Corner and not Cage Fighter's Corner and so on. But yeah,
I think he's part of the sphere to do with the Red Fems.
Right. Yeah.
I think he's come with them because I think I've seen him with them. Mm-hmm. And one of the most interesting things with the Red Fems when we first saw them, they came here the first time and it was pouring with rain.
Yeah.
And they were pushing us. Some old lady told me to shut the fuck up. Mm-hmm. And then she's on the ladder talking about all the children. And you're thinking, well, these women hate children. They hate men. They hate families. Mm-hmm. These are radical feminists. The first speech was about Andrea Dworkin and how inspiring she is.
There was a few about Andrea Dworkin, and she seemed to be some sort of a messiah held by a lot of these rad femmes. And it was like, have you guys even heard about Andrea Dworkin? Why are you promoting her? Out of everyone who you could promote, she would be the worst example of a role model or hero, I could imagine. But,
well, they're wondering why they're floundering a bit now. That's why. But what most people don't realise is a lot of people in leadership roles of feminism also like Andrea Dworkin's. The fluffy feminist, or the woman who believes in equality, as she understands it, where she means she doesn't really understand feminism, would say, oh, Andrea Dworkin, oh no, not really, that's one of those feminists. But they don't realise that a lot of these ones behind the scenes and the ones that are in political life and academic life, they're fans of Andrea Dworkin.
I don't know why anyone would be a fan of Andrea Dworkin.
Because they're extremists.
I mean,
extremists.
Doesn't seem to be the sort of person who would have fans, but I guess, maybe there are a few feminist extremists who, fit that bill.
Well, I'm waiting for them to make a sex doll modelled on her, but it might be a bit more expensive with the amount of materials you'd need, and it might come with a wheelchair as well.
I'm not sure J4MB are going to make the Andrea Dworkin sex doll, but
Well, if someone does, they'll probably end up in prison for grotesque behaviour.
Yeah, I remember that day as well, and it was, the weather was horrendous, I seem to recall, and bitterly cold, and then we seemed to have massive storm halfway through the talk, and I don't know, it was I was kind of finding it interesting just from these guys are really insane, perspective, but I'm not sure if you felt the same way.
Well, you were being bustled about. There were women backing into you, a little old lady with a rucksack, she's got a Scottish name, backing into me, putting umbrellas up so no one could see Mike. And Richard went home and he found that one of them had run the heel down his leg and he had dry blood on it.
Right,
and Natty was getting roughed up by some bloke. And was it Kelly? Kelly J. Keane was quite happy for that to go on, and yet they're saying that we're the ones that are and they know we're not going to hit them back because you don't do that, and if we did. Oh, and the stuff on the internet with these people, this woman saying she was a boxer coming in and saying, defending the granny who told me to, where to go. And it's just, and yet, I mean, it's crazy stuff. I think they seem to stop that kind of behaviour next time they came, and we haven't had it since, really.
Right,
and the sense of entitlement. And not only that, they came to Speaker's Corner and expected not to be heckled. I mean, who comes to Speaker's Corner? Heckling's a big part of this. It actually trains you to be a speaker, learning how to deal with people. But and if you come here and you expect the red carpet, you're going to deserve to cop.
You see this from some of the left-wing groups that they want to come along and not actually talk to anyone else. I think we saw this with Extinction Rebellion as well. They only wanted to keep to themselves. They weren't interested in talking to other people, and it's like, why did you come to Speaker's Corner then? I sort of I do think that with the radical feminist crew or this group that I kind of agree with a lot of the for instance being against the the trans women, men in female bathrooms or in playing various sports, that sort of thing. I in complete agreement with this.
Well, I say to these, I've said to them, I says, you're reaping what you sow. I says, you've been chased by your own Frankenstein monster in a skirt.
Right,
and a frock, basically, and they created this. They tried to destroy masculinity. They are feminized boys, and the only role model many boys have had are females, and often single mothers.
And they seem to go along with the feminization of the workplace and the society as a whole.
And look what's happened now, and the gynocentrism is in it. The gynocentrism in it is the fact that now men can complain. Men who identify as women can complain about women and it will be taken seriously. I mean, when has that happened in history? Unless you're very wealthy. It hasn't. And this is what I think the basis is that they've lost their position as women, where they have the moral authority to point things out to people and can, chastise people. And now we've got people who identify as, I mean, there's always been trans people, but the population has rocketed since men have been pushed out of the world, and masculinity and male values. And now we've got these people who did it, who are now, and the so ridiculously the hypocrisy is unbelievable. They can't even see what they've done. And I love it. I said, you've caused this. And I had this large Karen-like woman with legs like, tree trunks. And she was yelling at me because I said to her, I says, well, you're being deplatformed. I says, well, you're the ones who bloody started this. And she goes, how dare you? You're against free speech. And I says, what are you talking about?
I mean, and then there seemed to be a slightly insane narrative, which was that it was misogynistic men who were the reason for the promotion of trans women into women's sports and trans women being allowed into women's prisons or women's bathrooms, and so they came up with this group of patriarchal men who were running society, who were responsible for it all. And it's like, no, actually, the problem is the radical left, and that's the same entity who created the feminist movement.
Your baby,
and it was just headed in that direction,
But the real issue here is that we've got feminists in schools encouraging children to transition to being either boys or girls from the opposite sex. Now, it's not men doing that. It's not trans men doing that. It's feminists. And down in Brighton, they got some feminist teacher in the school, and they got loads of children who want to transition now. That's them doing it. It's another, and this is a fight over resources in many respects amongst the feminists.
It seems to me that we, in the past, had more of a traditional society, and there were more clearly defined gender roles. And that worked out well for people generally. And
worked out better.
And now, we've been moving against that ever since the 60s, for sure. And now it seems that we've got to this absurd stage of
clown world,
kind of destroying any way in which the genders interact with each other or function as themselves as well. And it appears we're at that stage now. What do you think?
Well, and also the thing is, a lot of with the young people, the Antifa and that, they are vulnerable because they've never been taught skills that they can use. The boys are not really masculine or strong enough to survive. I was brought up in a very female-dominated family. I mean, I was in care and all sorts of bloody things. And my biggest problem was being a boy and surrounded by females. And adult women who were feminists who treated me like the enemy all the time. And I watched, the huge effect on my life was like I was watching what adult women were doing when I was a child. And the insanity and the sadistic narcissism, I often call it, because the narcissism was unbelievable. And not only that, this whole thing, women and lying is actually a thing. Most people don't realize that. And men also can lie, but women and lying is actually quite a big thing. Not all women, obviously, but it is a thing.
Just sort of lying generally?
And white, I mean, often if you got social intelligence, you'll white lie, just for people's feelings. But often there are women who will lie their mother, because they learn by example from their mothers, they will tell the most treacherous lies casually.
Mm-hmm.
And they will also tell lies about other people, which will have huge outcomes for that individual, social outcomes or whatever. And they're quite nonplussed about it. And yet, there are men like that. Obviously, it's sociopathic behavior, but it seems to be more and more a lot of women are sociopathic, and a lot of them are respectable-looking ladies.
Mm-hmm.
And, meeting these rad femmes coming here now, these older ladies, these divorcees who are on permanent holiday, from their ex-husband, divorcees, old divorcees.
Yeah, yeah.
And they're chastising everybody and going around telling them that they, that men have the privilege. And you're just thinking, you just start not taking them seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And I was brought up to listen to women, and even though I was surrounded by crazy ladies, dysfunctional women, I'll just have a quick look at this. And of course, as I call them, militant dependents. And there's another term which is a bit probably shocking for people, but I know a lot of women who actually prostitute everything they touch. They prostitute people, they prostitute things. They go through their lives prostituting everyone else instead of themselves.
Right.
The only way they know how to operate is by using other people, and there's no sense of shame or accountability. And accountability is a really important thing if you're going to be in a position of power. And if you're in power, you shouldn't be a dependent and behaving like one where you want more stuff all the time.
Yeah. And
we've seen that.
I'd agree with that completely, yeah.
We're outside of the argument. Years ago when we first started out, we didn't really have a language, and we've had our best people in this movement, men and women, who have been online, and they've taught us a language. Misandry was never a word. There was a fight over Wiki, wasn't it?
So it was what, Wikipedia?
Wikipedia, yeah.
Right, yeah.
About feminists kept saying it wasn't a real word.
Right, yeah.
And eventually, early feminists used to use the term.
Mm-hmm.
And now, and the funny thing is what's happening now with a lot of feminists. They've got someone somewhere skim reading all the men's rights stuff, and they're taking our arguments, and then they're trying to attack us with them.
Mm-hmm.
They say, patriarchy hurts men as well. I love the deep resounding voice of Paul Elam when he speaks, because you almost get red-pilled again every time you listen to it.
Right, yeah.
And Tom Golden and Janice Fiamingo, they're absolutely brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And that's standard of thought. And also, it's incredibly generous and often more kind than what feminists are vindictive as hell, a lot of them.
Yeah, the conversations and the arguments that you hear from them and so on. Yeah.
And the gobbledygook, where they confuse people with all the language, which is, what leftists and Marxists do anyway. And of course, it's this whole, what's happened, if you ask what's happened with now, is that people are beginning to realize the Marxism and the intersectionality and all this stuff to do with race, sex, the whole thing based them in on historic, what is it? Well, what's the term? When people are, I can't think of it. This is what happened. I'm not really, for someone like me to be doing this, I'm not really the person, but to be, because I'm a bit fluffy around the edges and I've got a memory like a sieve. But to come here, somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
And I also do the organising to sort everything out, to remind everyone that we're coming and that we'll be here and we're going to have a coffee. And that's really important, because in our movement you have people on different levels, and sometimes the little Santa's helpers are important.
I was just going to say, I think what you do is important, and I think it's a problem that men do have, which is actually being able to continue like interacting with each other as a community. Just, I guess, especially if it's an all men's group or primarily men's group, because there's not the women to act as a social glue to kind of keep everyone together.
It's a real problem. And ownership is a real problem when people feel. But you see, us guys go back years.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a lot of things we don't agree on.
Yeah, yeah.
It's quite funny because often two of our guys have this argument, which has gone on for about 5 years now, about, what's the argument about? Conspiracy. Once that comes out, an argument about conspiracy, that comes out, and they never get anywhere with it. They're both discontent with it, and they're annoyed with each other, and then they get over it and they're friends again. But it happens every few months, and it's the same argument. But the thing is, I wrote something years ago and said we need to rub along a bit better together, even if we disagree. And yet it's very hard to get, very few people want to public speak, and the ones that do might even find their own way to it anyway. It's a rare bird.
Yeah,
and we do need, I mean, and like I was saying with Mike, and when we had the first conference in London, Mike was a bit worried because we didn't have many people buying tickets to start with.
Right.
And so we'd been to Golders Green protesting, circumcision protesting, and Golders Green is a Jewish area, so that was interesting. It went well, it was a good day. A very funny thing, a woman came up to Mike, a rather well-travelled looking old lady, and said to Mike he wouldn't get a blowjob around here if he wasn't circumcised, which may be why Mike doesn't do the protesting anymore. But that was funny. But and after, when Mike left, and so we all started talking, and we talked about, well, let's all we'll volunteer. And I paid for my ticket, we paid for our tickets, but we volunteered as well. And that's one of the things other groups don't have, where you've actually got a nest of people who have all their own interlinking. And I've got to say, there's the social knitting. We got guys now who are way better social knitting than I've ever done. And Natty does it as well. I mean, they're ahead of everything I've ever done. But you need a population of people who keep everyone together. And we've got that now, and we never used to have that. Really important job, and not one that's going to give you great status, because you're not going for that. But
no, it's extremely important, and I think you're great at doing this. It's actually just sending out the invites, but also at actually just getting on with everyone.
Yeah. Well,
whereas there's I think I'm okay at getting on with other people. I do have occasional spats with people, but then I seem to be quite good at not turning that into a ending friendship moments or something. Whereas I just find with some of the guys that the spats do turn into these I'm not talking to so and so anymore moments, and that's kind of annoying, and I think I prefer it if we were all doing better, with regards to that.
One of our guys, Richie, said, you got a great way about you, Rod. He says, you make everyone feel intelligent. And that's nice. And because the thing is, from my point of view, I want to do something. And it's really important for me, as many people to come as possible. And sometimes I ring people up if I hear that they're not having a good time of it, and they may not even like it, and they might find it, but sometimes you keep an eye on people. If they're having a bad time.
In terms of where we are, in terms of the issues that are affecting men and boys, and also generally the whole feminist thing now, because I see a lot of the stuff has been sort of swept aside with coronavirus, just because that seems to be the new black star that's come into the solar system that has just destroyed our focus on all of the other major issues. But I mean, the problems are still there, isn't it? There's still huge problems with the family court system and with with rape culture and all of that.
And the dangerous feminists, as our people have told us, the ones behind the scenes, the political cross-party feminists and the academics and all these other lawyers and judges, they're still changing things all the time to be against fathers. And the taxes are put against people. I mean, we have people that, because we're lucky enough to deal with people who are ex-fathers for justice people, and men who've gone through the wood chipper. And they know what it is, and it's really important to have these people here too. I mean, one of the things in England, which has been a big thing from my point of view, is Swain O'Pie bringing together. He's a veteran speaker, a veteran activist, and an author, and a speaker, a lecturer on men's rights and anti-feminism. If that's the right term, hopefully he's pleased with that. But He brought together all of us from all over the country, came together. That's when I first met you.
Yes.
And it created our community. And some of the things he was trying to do with it didn't work, but what it did is it got us all connected.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gone on from there. It was so important to do that.
Yeah.
I do get a little annoyed with some. I've got colleagues who will criticize Mike or criticize other people. That annoys me because they don't realize if it wasn't for Mike, where would we be? He's a very important guy. And in his time, I mean, I met Mike before he started the party. He's a really important guy. And it's just like, well, go start your own party then, if you know. And yet the people who do criticize him are my friends as well. But we've also got to be careful because feminists are trying to co-opt our work and take credit for it and then make it into a woman's issue and then take the funding. Not that we have any funding. I think.
What was this in relation to?
In relation to the whole movement.
Okay.
Feminists are now starting to talk about male suicide.
Right.
Masculinity is the problem. Yeah, sure. We have to be aware of that. And I've
seen some of that in the UK with some of the organisations that have been promoted. There's very few actual MRAs on them, and instead, quite a few people who won't use the word feminism, for instance, and who won't criticise that movement. And it seems that they're getting some funding, not a whole load, but some funding and some exposure in the media. And we're, the actual MRAs and the actual anti-feminists aren't getting any of that funding, any of that exposure.
What is it, basement-dwelling woman beaters, according to the mainstream.
Yeah, World of Warcraft playing neckbeards who live in their mother's basement.
We've even got, with the alternative media, is the other massive change, where how many people are watching CNN or BBC anymore? And people like Carl Benjamin, who I was lucky enough to meet once after going to your place for a party once.
It was
coming back on the train. I met him. I spoke to him for over an hour. People are listening to him now. More people who aren't in the alternative movement. And of course, with COVID, everyone's been stuck at home, and they're listening to the completely same old record on the news items every hour, and thinking, well, there must be more going on, and starting to do research. And I don't agree with everything that Sargon says, but that doesn't matter. And of course, Jordan Peterson coming along, my God, brilliant. And of course, a lot on the right don't like Jordan Peterson, some of the things about him, and that's fine. It doesn't mean he was an unimportant person.
Oh, he's massive.
He's massively important.
Majorly important, And really good on, I think, questioning, actually destroying a lot of the feminist arguments, and doing so from his own intellectual background as a one of the clearly one of the most amazing thinkers that there's been in recent times, and his kind of clinical psychologist background, and then applying that to the feminist arguments and absolutely destroying them. So I think he's done really well with that.
Well, going on from the perspective of, if you were looking at the right and to talk, my European people, I'm one of them. One of the challenges is that European people have, Western people have not been looking after their children very well. I come from generations of dysfunction in my family, and you look at like some of the family, with mass immigration and that. Some of these other families, they're more traditional. They look after their kids better. And they're more focused on their children. Our generation, and my parents and my grandparents, the boomers and people like that, they all want to be, they all want to be this great success. 1950s style, California with the great lifestyle and all the rest of it. But the kids are like accessories to it. And in dysfunctional families, it's 1,000 times worse. And we need to actually look at parenting better, and also teaching children the basics, so they actually from a young age they're more business minded, so they're going to survive better than just being lost like I was. Because other people, you see some other families, good families, their kids grow up standing well, firmly on both 2 feet.
I think less narcissistic, less hedonistic as well, that's I mean, there just needs to be a lot of help given to the next generation so they avoid these pitfalls.
Well, we don't even know what gender we are.
Right, yeah. Instead,
yeah,
they're having, they're confusing the hell out of them by saying they may have been born with the wrong gender or in the wrong body.
Well, a lot of those creeps who go to schools and all this, and of course, I was talking to Linda Brown, and she said she knows a drag queen, which is, very popular in London and years ago. And this drag queen was saying, drag queen story time is wrong, because the thing is with drag acts and all that, the stripping and all that sort of thing, and strip clubs, and having it's adult humor. It's not just adult humor; it's extreme adult humor, in an environment where there's drugs and there's an environment of lots of sex. So, and when you have somebody in an outrageous costume showing off their erroneous zones, whether they have them or not, being another gender, that's inappropriate for children.
I think, there is the hypersexualization of children, and I mean, you're seeing that now. There's that uproar about the new Netflix special, Cuties, it's called.
Oh, God.
And, there's a lot of, it seems, promotion of young girls acting in a hypersexualized manner.
Well, the main child's a black girl. I would expect more from the black community to say, hold on, we're not whores, or, what are we, just sex objects? But you don't. And they seem to think, some people seem to think it's fine. It's not fine.
No.
Because it's disastrous. And my own family, I've seen with what's gone on in behind the closed doors. It's wrong. There's so much. Children should be focused on, as we all know, interacting and learning how to deal with each other, learning what not to do, learning the consequences if you do it.
I mean, generally, I think with their own sexuality, I think there's a lot to be said for just stepping back and letting them develop at their own pace, at their own level, and not coming along and saying that they, should be competing for this talent show where they should be doing all this twerking and grinding and whatnot. And
going to university, when most of the people who go to university aren't university quality people. All the trades, all the crafts that we used to have. Yes, you're competing with China now, so that kills a lot. But a lot of people, highly skilled people, which aren't working anymore, which are going to university and getting absolutely massive debt, while the gender studies hypocrite is getting medical pay, all the medical bills paid for, and retirement.
Yeah, I think as you've sort of said, it's within the West, it's the parents' generation not looking after the children, and then they're just doing extremely poorly, and it's all of these I suppose death by 1,000 cuts to the next generation, and just treating them really badly, and hypersexualizing the children, getting them confused about
no longer being a civilized
what gender
country.
they are, and then also not promoting the traditional values, which is what has always worked to actually ensure that we do well, that each generation does well, and we're not doing that. So
and having the skills, the basic skills, learning to do well. We've always had dysfunctional people, dysfunctional communities, dysfunctional families, but now when everyone becomes that, and being chastised by wealthy children from university, and that is also amusing. And if you do tell them any details of what you saw as a child and what you saw it happen to people in your family, they mock the hell out of you, and they go, "Oh, you poor little thing," and then you're saying, "Well, no, actually, I'm not a poor little thing, but I'm explaining to you the reality." Because I was in a children's home, and at 7 I realised how lucky I was compared to other kids there. I say that all the time.
I don't find that's a particularly human response, to someone who suffered child abuse, mocking them.
Well, they do, because they've never...
That's quite disgusting, to.
But look at one of the things that turned a lot of people against feminism in this country was they did absolutely nothing to what they call the grooming gangs, where even 1 million, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of young girls and probably boys have been raped, mass raped, and the feminists never said anything.
Yeah, curiously silent about that one,
curiously
wasn't it?
silent, because it wasn't the white men doing it. It was Pakistani men, Muslim Pakistani men doing this all over the country since the day they got off the plane, going back 40 years. And they said nothing. And I've seen people here who were who used to argue with us, change their tone completely when they realised that was going on, and where were the feminists? The thing is, they're not going to get funding by attacking the Pakistani community. They'll get funding. I mean, it's brutal. A lot of these people, when they're running their charities and they get their careers, by attacking a European man, they will be able to continue, calling for charity money and all the rest of it, and money from government. But they can't attack the other communities and minorities because they're meant to be, the victim stack, basically. It's utterly grotesque. We once had a woman here, an old woman, and I was talking about suicide, and at that time, it was about 12 or 13 men a day in Britain, and she was dancing in front of me, pretending to play the violin and clapping, and smiling. We call her I call her Old Fanny. I pretend she's one of the last of the white feather girls, the suffragettes.
I'm not sure if it's the one who has interacted with me a number of times, but it may be.
I haven't seen her. Hopefully she's popped a cork and been run over or something.
Right, okay, yeah.
But she was the one who turned up when we had the Reggie Yates Men at War on. Right. And she was screaming, well, men take bullets and women take penises. That was her remark.
Right.
And I never heard what she actually said. Maybe we should share the bullets round, I think, especially when she's concerned. But the fact is, you got this well-dressed older lady laughing at that, the suicide of young people, young men, because they're men. I've had young women come up, well-dressed young women with young men, handsome young guys, all professional-looking people, and they go, oh, I've been raped, the ladies say. Oh, I've been raped, and so casually. I expect that a bad haircut, you'd get more of an emotional reaction from that than if you'd actually been raped. These people, they haven't been raped. I don't believe they have.
Are they just defining rape in a very loose
in a very loose terms,
context,
loose terms, and of course when you're expanding the definition of a horrible crime, you can just flick your hair and say, oh, I have been,
So some guy slapped me on the arse. Hence I was raped.
Probably not even that. Maybe fart rape or stare rape or something like that.
Mark Pearson.
No, and the thing is, it's really offensive because you take someone who's been brutally raped and then you got someone like this, a socialite, walking around from a well-educated, they had to have been from the way they were dressed and everything. I should have said to the men, remember me, because you are going to regret it. These women are going to destroy you, and they will. Once they get bored with them, it'll be the men's fault, and they'll strip them of everything.
I think if they're interacting at that level with, the concerns about men and boys, then, it doesn't bode well for their current partners, if that's the way they think. And, I do just think that there's this problem of, I suppose, kind of just putting women in this position where they're, in this, they're able to judge all of these gender relations.
Judge, jury, and executioner. They're behaving like aristocrats. They conduct themselves, and then they tell you, oh, the best thing about the radical feminists is they say we have no voice. They're taking our voice. What the hell do you hear about? You can have a plane crash or a boat go down, and everyone drowns or is killed, burnt to death. And then they talk about, a ridiculous non-issue to do with nail polish or something ridiculous. Or some idiot wolf whistle, somebody. A non-issue. And often it's something that's not even really unpleasant. Or even air conditioning is sexist or something like that. And these things are things. And I remember when I worked years ago in a design company, the complaining about the temperature. By people who have never done any physical work in their life or any active sport or anything, have no muscle or anything like that, and they just sit there shivering. Jump about, get up for a minute, have a walk, go make yourself a cuppa, walk around the block in your break, warm up. Don't wear something sexy because it's going to keep you cold. Who are you trying to impress in the office? It's pathetic. And yet, then when you talk about something real like suicide or the wood chipper of what men go through and how they lose contact with their children, while the ex is actually destroying the children.
Just ignore that and move
Just
back to
ignore
the
that,
air
yeah,
conditioning concern.
Well,
Yeah,
one of
yeah.
the guys that joined us here once, his 2 daughters were taken into care, and on his Facebook thing he's got the picture of his 3-year-old daughter who's got a cigarette burn right in the forehead where her mother stuck a cigarette.
Yeah, yeah.
And nobody took any notice of it. And he's fought to get the girls back, and the girls want their daddy back. He used to have a plastic bag with a little teddy bear in it because the daughter asked her father to buy her one, and he says, well, you already got one, honey, but she wanted it. It was from a second-hand store because obviously everything's been taken from him. He's broke. And she got one, and she said, this is for you, Daddy, so that you can remember us. Mm-hmm. And so he used to come here with a plastic bag with a teddy in it, just so his daughter was close to him. And he's declaring war he's declared war legally upon what they did to him. The whole legal thing, the social workers.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I think the father's rights concerns are, I mean, absolutely abhorrent. And yeah, you know, I've been looking into this recently, and the situation's got a lot worse in the last 10 years. And
because the top feminists are pushing it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And yet, unlike if we were like feminists, we'd be saying, oh, well, men don't do things like that. We know they're terrible men. We know they're awful men. We know there are men that can do terrible things to children and women and other men. Our feminists, they just won't talk about that. The only women they hate are men's rights activist women.
Right.
They're the ones that are bringing back sexism and misogyny.
Mm-hmm.
And my little posters here are good.
Yeah.
People do them, look at them, and take photos.
Sure, sure.
And
you just have them in the background when you're doing your
always,
talks.
Always. And the police let me do it. It's just it takes half the bloody day to put them all up there. Now I've got a better system now, but
right, yeah.
Fluffing around, but no one's ripped them up yet.
That's good. It's good that's not happened. I think we'll probably call it a day then.
Yep,
so thank you for talking to me, Rod.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, bye bye.